targets, but unfortunately, due to many reasons and factors, we are quite behind. I think, I don't know if my colleagues agree also, it's not a matter of a lack of regulation. For example, district heating in a way is regulated. Probably you could look more into regulating felling wood, utilization of wood. That is probably an open issue. But otherwise, I think you have targets, you have policies, you have a large share of regulation. But it also needs, again, political will to be there, pragmatism. And I think that
the capacity to absorb, you say.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martinenko.
I would like to kind of maybe tackle or touch upon how could the international financial institutions and basically development banks such as EBRD and also to a certain extent help and enable clean heating investments. Basically, what we've seen in Kosovo, but also in the region, are interventions. But in this respect, I would like to maybe touch upon how could I advise support this faster movement, faster progress in decarbonizing heating investments, and obviously, I would say the elephant in the room, how do we kind of balance between affordability and long-term goals that we have in terms of green transition and decarbonization. So I'll start that off with these questions and maybe continue the discussion there.
If I may, I wanted to complement Maury's speech. Basically, and then I come back to your question. The main issue which we see and have a lot of experience in this area in different countries is institutional setup. How you organize district heating sector. What responsibility of the municipality, of the city, and what responsibility of the government or relevant ministry of economy or regional development, whatever. And how they interact with each other. And I think this is where we are currently stuck in Kosovo, which I mentioned. This EIB study is waiting for 1 year plus to take it forward. It's about 500 million investment, and we as EBRD have money. I'm sure our colleagues also happy to chip in and to finance this project, but there is no clarity and there is no political will, but also there is no understanding how this should be organized, because it can be organized differently. It can be organized through like central state-owned enterprise which will manage all the cities and all district heating networks, or it can be like central PAU managing many projects with different cities, or it can be delegated to cities. So there are different ways to organize it, and I think this is a main challenge to move forward, for example, with district heating. And it's the same applies to other countries. Coming back to your question, from EBRD point of view, we also tackled this sector with the different layers, because indeed energy efficiency is the key, so you need to reduce energy demand first, and then this is how we do it through our different products. The main product, like for standalone buildings, individual buildings, we have GEF. It's called GEF, Green Energy Financing Facility, which we implement through commercial banks. And this is to address affordability concerns. So actually, in many projects, to address affordability concerns, we have a grant component, usually between 10–20% of the total cost, and plus technical assistance attached to this product. So number of consultants helping the clients or intermediary institutions, commercial banks, to prepare and finance this type of projects. I think the experience was great in Kosovo. I think we financed over 2,000 houses already through these credit lines. Also, business is also consuming heat. We also have similar Go Green credit line for SMEs. So that's also in high demand, especially nowadays with energy liberalization started recently. We see a lot of uptake in renewable energy projects like solar rooftop PVs, and that's only through these credit lines we finance 50 megawatt of different projects, prosumers who produce electricity for their own needs. There is a large part is public buildings. It's a quite large stock in Kosovo, around 2,000 buildings, and together with World Bank and EU, we also supported Kosovo Energy Efficiency Fund. Recently, also we signed the loan agreement together with a grant for 70 million, which will target 400 public buildings. This all it will include heating component, because all of these 400 buildings have heating in different technologies, some biomass, some heat pumps, or whatever. And within this project, we will address in this particular sector. But for the cities, indeed, I think it's key to decide what way, to organize it, manage this sector, and how to finance. So I think there is a lot of opportunities, but we would like to see more political will and also real projects, and that's the way forward. Like in Jakova, I also wanted to mention, we visited this project, district heating, also financed by EU, I believe, and SECO, and it's a good project, but it's small scale, is not enough capacity to make it break even. And again, we offered our support to the city, to the government, to increase the capacity, but there was unclear kind of decision. So the government wanted to wait to see how this project develops. There was an issue with biomass, so it should also address availability of biomass, sustainable biomass, but it was addressed. But there are many organizational, institutional issues which has to be sought out and decided by the government.
Maybe to just continue a bit on this, it seems that from what I'm kind of hearing is that there are, in the case of Kosovo at least, but also some of the countries in the region, there is the issue of the political will in terms of the ability to absorb and commit to a project and deliver on it in a time frame which makes sense, and also the institutional mosaic, which somehow has different layers of decision making, which in turn prolong the process. So in the context of decarbonizing heating, it seems that the municipal level and the central level are in this institutional mosaic more or less not in sync. Is this something that we see throughout the municipalities in Kosovo, but maybe also the region, or is this something Kosovo specific? Because obviously it's a hindrance to being able to both absorb and implement projects, because the amount that you're talking of will have a significant impact in being able to transition from what we have and the dependence on fossil fuels, in this case, coal-based electricity generation. And in this context, the question whether this is kind of the bottleneck to be able to push forward with decarbonizing the heating in the region, also Kosovo.
There are different, of course, approaches and different models in the region and in Europe in general. But you need to have either central approach with a strong central government, strong ministry, PAUs who will deliver. It's also one model, you can do it, but you need to deliver, you need to do something. Or you trust to municipalities, to mayors, you delegate these type of projects, you manage it from the top, but the all work implementation is done by municipality. From our point of view, this is a better approach, which we saw in many countries, like in my home country, in Ukraine, we did all the project on municipal level with a strong mayor, strong PAUs. We built capacity. That was really our role, to build local capacity, because it's not only district heating, It's roads, public transport, water, many other projects. For the government, it's difficult to challenge. Here in Kosovo, it's very centralized. Public finance is very centralized. So all decisions are taken by the central government, Ministry of Finance. When you go and see mayors, they're limited. They have no independent financial authority, so they have very small capex allocated for the year. They cannot do it from their own budget. And all decisions are made by the central government. But central government is also not doing. So the central government does not have enough capacity to implement, and they don't allow municipalities to do it. So it's kind of stuck in between. This is from my experience.
Maybe just a short comment. I think, yes, definitely you need political consensus between central and municipal level. And this is probably, political consensus between parties is nothing that is, or a lack of that consensus, nothing that is typical for Kosovo only. If you followed a bit German politics, we just had a problem, a principal problem that parties could not come together just to vote, let's say, new judges on the constitutional court. So just because we will not work with that party together, we don't do it, no matter what the case is. Yes, you need that political consensus. For example, we cannot lend to the municipalities in Kosovo. I don't know how that is the case for the other colleagues. For us, they simply have no rating, so to say. Yeah. So the funds from IFIs always go through the central level. This is the channel. And then it depends how the institutional setup is organized. For example, Thermokost is a municipal company. Yeah? The water utilities are kind of regional, but under central, let's say, ownership. So it really depends on the partner also. Waste collection is different. Waste collection is central, is municipal, depositing is so yeah, but in any case you need political consensus and you have to probably recognize what is in the national interest and what needs to be done. But of course, mayors may always also insist on local, let's say, interests. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to centrally implemented projects, they also have to care for their electorate, which is understandable. So. Yeah.
Maybe I can also add to this question. So I think a good example of this collaboration between the central and the local is the Energy Efficiency Fund, which kind of addresses some of these issues we're mentioning. So on one hand, you have municipalities who don't have financial capacity, they don't have technical capacity to deliver projects, and the central level doesn't really have the projects because the projects are at the municipal level. So I think what the Energy Efficiency Fund achieved is to centralize the financing mechanism, but also the technical capacity, because, I mean, it's a small country, it's hard to get these implementing units to have the capacity to deliver these projects, and having all of them in one fund, like the Energy Efficiency Fund, I think was a really good idea to address this issue. And now municipalities are only going and taking this as a service from the Energy Efficiency Fund. They're proposing the buildings, they collaborate with the fund in defining which building and how to manage the reconstruction process. But the Energy Efficiency Fund is delivering the financing and the technical capacity. So I think it's a good example, but I cannot say that this can be replicated in other areas. I mean, district heating is also a bit of a difficult one. If you think about, for example, Thermokos in Pristina right now, can they expand to Fushkosova, which is another municipality, but not very far? I mean, technically, you could connect it to another municipality, but because it's not in the same municipality, it won't expand there. So do you want to create another enterprise for each of small municipalities to have their own district heating system? Is a question whether from an institutional and governance side, it makes sense, especially having in mind, the issues that I just mentioned on the Energy Efficiency Fund, whether they have the financial capacity, whether they have the technical capacity to deliver projects. I mean, some of the proposed projects for district heating are in some municipalities that do not have an enterprise, they don't have anything about district heating. Now, the Thermocos is a legacy, but I want to just mention one thing, and is that a lot of district heating systems, not just in Kosovo, but in the region, they have really difficult financial challenges, and most of the time they're subsidized by, they're mostly financially, they're not viable, let's say. And even though they're using fossil fuels, they're using dirty fuels, and I think this is another challenge when thinking about district heating as a solution.
Radon, to continue on what you're talking about, on what you're kind of highlighting, so how can we rethink these heating sources? How can we kind of move a bit and more beyond the discussions we're having in the region about the alternatives to heating sources? So maybe to pick on your thoughts there and to continue the discussion with this, let's say this theme, how can we rethink these heating sources? Is there a way?
So when we're talking about the heating sources or the fuels in this case, I think one of the challenges that we have on the clean heating side is that we're competing with fuels that are not cost reflective. So we're talking about traditional biomass, which is illegally or informally logged. It's not cost reflective. We're talking about coal that is somehow subsidized and given sometimes as a benefit. So I think these price distortions do not really help. So I think we need to address this first. And the first reaction to that is always, oh, people will not be able to afford it. So I think coupled with having prices being cost reflective, we need to design strong consumer programs to protect vulnerable consumers, so social protection programs, and really focus on them. And not giving the same price to everyone, because when you have a low price, then everyone will abuse it in a way, so it will overconsume this fuel. So I think this is a good start, and what this will do is, this first step in the framework, which is the energy efficiency, it will incentivize energy efficiency, because one way you can incentivize energy efficiency, if you increase prices, you don't need to have any other incentives, right? People will start buying more efficient heating systems, they will insulate buildings. So that's really important. But then there's also regulations on building codes, other incentives for people to improve the energy efficiency of the building. I think this is also important, coming back to the heating sources, because the heating system needs to be sized to the consumption of the building. And once you have a good building envelope, then also the investment in the heating system will be lower, sometimes even half the capacity. Now turning to the next one is the district heating system. There are some renewable energy options which are being developed now. I mean, we're looking at biomass, solar district heating, geothermal, other options. These are all options that are being developed. Unfortunately, not at a scale that can really replace the fossil fuel systems that we have, especially in this region. I mean, there are systems that are big as 200, 300 megawatt systems, thermal, which are very difficult to switch to something like solar, biomass. But the future of these district heating systems will be a combination of many different technologies that are cleaner, combined with energy storage. And I think we'll need to find which ones are the ones that are more affordable at this stage. And then we'll go to the next one, which is the individual solutions, mostly for the single-family homes. I think, as Sergey mentioned, I mean, heat pumps are the obvious future for the individual systems. They're very efficient, they're clean. However, they have to rely on electricity. And when we think about transitioning, 70% of the heating, which is currently done with firewood, to heat pumps, we're talking about a much bigger electricity system in Kosovo than we have right now. And we have done some analysis in our as part of our climate change development report. And until 2050, we will need to build another 7 gigawatts of new renewables, solar and wind, plus battery storage. So that's a lot of investments to enable this transition to, let's say, heat pumps. So I think it will be a combination still. I think we cannot rely only on heat pumps or only on district heating. District heating also cannot go into areas which are not densely populated because it won't become very economic anymore. So we'll need to have this kind of a holistic approach. And I think this is where the government can step in with a strategy, developing a roadmap for sustainable heating, looking at what are the low-hanging fruit, where can we start with, you know, heat pumps, maybe district heating systems that are affordable and cleaner, and also investing more in energy efficiency.
One thing I wanted to add when it comes to affordability, I think Thermokost, as far as I know, for example, in Pristina, operates on a surplus. I think since this, let's say, last shift to the second generation district heating, as we can probably call it, when they moved from heavy oil to cogeneration, and I think since then Thermokost operates with a surplus. If you are lucky on the consumer side, if you're one of the 140,000 households connected in the densely populated areas, and soon I think we are moving into almost 200,000 household connections, I think then district heating is probably the cheapest option. Yeah? So I think the opportunities are there and the social aspect is there. So I think, and the study that Sergei mentioned on the 8 municipality, it was not probably complete, that studies, but there are indications in that study that for 6 of the 8 cities there is a positive net present value. Yeah? I think except for Drenas and Mitrovica. So it really also from an economic and it's a social point of view, it really makes sense to invest in these central district heating systems.
Yeah. No, just to say that, I mean, in the case of, well, if you look at Jakova, it has heavy subsidies from the government to purchase the biomass. I think there was some figure of 55 euros per megawatt hour, which is really huge for a subsidy. And this was basically grant funded biomass district heating system, right? In the case of Thermokost, yes, it's a surplus. I mean, but it's a district heating system based on coal. So, and also the question, and also the price they get for the electricity loss, is it really a market price? I mean, that's the question, because, I mean, of course, these prices are indirectly always kept in a way that they are more affordable, because the challenge with district heating is that there's always the alternative. I mean, people switched from Thermokost to other sources, and if you have this spiraling effect, the competitiveness and the prices of district heating company will increase, and they will lose more consumers. So it's a very difficult business for sure, and maintaining the competitiveness is very, very difficult. We've done a regional study, I mean, and we've seen, analyzed the financial situation of many of the district heating systems in the region, and many of them receive subsidies, or they're somehow struggling with, you know, maintaining profitability, which is understandable, because you have the affordability challenge, and it's very political, and you cannot really increase these prices that easily. But this is just to say that it is very important for governments to ensure that these companies are very efficient, because they will need to compete, you know, with other options, because people will have other options than district heating always. And that's the message I think we'll need to have for the government.
So basically, I mean, first of all, thank you all for very thoughtful input. What is something that is interesting for me, especially in the last round, in the last exchange, is this tension between, I would say, affordability, technology, and technology choices, and obviously the path forward. And so if there is something, a path forward in terms of the aim to decarbonize, to have more of a green perspective in the idea of the source, let's say how we generate electricity. So if there is one, if you would say, policy reform that you would advise governments in the region to undertake with these three kind of issues: affordability, technology, and the need to move to a more greener, let's say, energy production, what would that one policy reform be?
Already mentioned about institutional setup. I think the overall strategy how to tackle this sector is important to define, and also how to operationalize it, how it's going to work, and strategize, draft a sustainable heating strategy, and that will be important to start with. But also agree, it was mentioned already that price signals is very important, because electricity was and still for population subsidized, and which basically drove the whole sector to the wrong direction. People invested a lot in electricity-driven heat pumps or air conditioning. Many use air conditioning here, which are not the most efficient for heating. And that's basically, on the other hand, biomass as a sector was not developed, and the price was high. So it was disadvantage, obviously, against electricity. The same with the thermocos, using, of course, cheap heat from keg. Obviously, it's kind of undermined the market. So I think this should be also kind of taken into account by the government when deciding about the strategy.
Yeah, just to
Most
effective leverage. I think we all know that there is no carbon pricing also yet in Kosovo, so this will probably also change the game. So basically, to give the price for renewable energy, let's say, the price that it deserves, so to say, and make it even more competitive.
Yeah, just to add, I agree. Pricing definitely. So cost-reflective pricing, also combined with social protection. I think that's key, because we know that politically we can just increase prices. But just to give you some examples, I think what price distortion made is that a lot of people installed, especially in urban areas, inefficient electric heaters instead of heat pumps in just the last 10 years. And these are basically stranded costs. So it's really hard to replace these now. So these are really damaging impacts of price distortions that are very difficult to tackle in the future. With the right price signals, I think you ensure that people will install efficient heating, they will have more efficient buildings, or they will strive to have more efficient buildings. And I think this is a good start, but also it reduces the damage that can be created. So I think this is very important. But any other policy that basically incentivizes the cleaner and more efficient options, whether it's building codes or whether it's other financial incentives that the government can provide, tax breaks or tax additions for inefficient systems and fuels. So I think that's one area that can have the largest impact.
Thank you very much. I think what Moritz, Redon, and Sergei told us today is quite clear that it's a mix of various elements, that if we want to decarbonize the home heating system, we need to understand that it's not just a technical fix, first of all. Secondly, we're at the discussion which looks at affordability, policy, capacity to absorb financial support, and at the same time understand the targets that we've set with the Sofia Declaration 5 years ago for the Western Balkans. And in lieu of this, I would like to thank the panelists, but I would also like to open the floor for a couple of questions before we head out for a break. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate really that you brought here excellent panelists and from the very important institutions. Regarding the decarbonizing of heating, this is really a complex issue, specifically for Kosovo, for us, considering the energy mix that we currently have. I agree completely what Mr. Beguli said, that introduction of heat pump in such a big scale could bring us to another problem, which is increase of electricity use. But on the other hand, that is increase of CO2 emission, considering that Kosovo has the CO2 emission factor for electricity in Kosovo is very high. I don't know any country in Europe that has similar of this emission. And the energy efficiency, of course, is better because the cheapest energy is energy that is not spent, of course. But in other hand, again, this is complex because this needs to have some instruments in place. For example, maybe energy performance certification, which we still do not have in place, or another issue, which is district heating systems. Kosovo is among countries that have very small amount of heating provided by district heating systems. And now it was mentioned, and of course it was announced previously in recent years, that these 8 studies for district heating systems in cities. This is very important, and considering renewable energies there. But these systems are in big scale, and implementation of this will be hard and will go slowly, having in consideration the complexity that was mentioned by panelists in coordination of central level and municipalities. So, sorry that I went so much around. My question is this: is it possible to find another financing instruments to invest in small-scale district heating systems in small towns or villages, which could serve as example, for example, by introducing and incentivizing ESCO model, ESCO service companies model? Is it possible from the point of view of the banks? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maybe, sir.
Yeah, I visited recently, actually, Kamenitsa and Shtime municipalities. They're both interested in district heating. Of course, they're small. We're talking about 1–2 million. They even did some pre-feasibility studies. But, and they are happy to invest, but who is going to be our counterparty? They have no capacity, no experience, no company. Government is not considering this as a priority. They have 500 million investment for larger cities, let alone Kamenitsa. So the issue is to find the right counterparty, and that's what I raised initially. I really like experience. I worked in Georgia some time ago, and they have municipal development fund. It's like also Redon mentioned, Kosovo Energy Efficiency Fund. It's if you like, central PAU, project implementation unit, with a good specialist, with the market salaries. It's like government institution, and they're responsible for all municipal projects, roads, public transport, waste, water supply, district heating, energy efficiency, and so on. So it's like 50 people of very professional, well-paid, implementing government projects and working with all, EBRD, World Bank, KfW, all institutions, EU. So I think this is the right model, but of course you need time to develop this capacity.
That's a good idea. I think, yes, I think this is something to explore. And ESCOs, like you said, it can be also a private company that could provide this heating as a service. But to do that, I think we'll need to establish a whole new regulatory framework, because if a private investor would come for such a service, they will need to have the right regulatory framework in place, because they need to make sure that this investment will be secure, and that that the people living in the multifamily apartment building will be paying this at some rate that will be cost reflective, again, also for the investment that they have done. So there are some interesting, I think there's also, in Pristina, there is a building that is somehow working like that. And it's, I think, the same owner of the hotel that built this residence. I think they have some kind of a large heat pump, and they're billing each tenant separately, which is actually an example of what you described. But, but the question is, how do we scale that? How can we make that throughout the country? I think, of course, that project is maybe a bit specific, but I think this could be done. And the other question will be, what will be the fuel? What will be the heat source? So is it going to be biomass, or because there are not going to be a lot of other options, I think, for a building level heating system.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the institutional questions, but as Renan already triggered, main question is also technology. What is the best technology? We hear a lot about these small village or city projects, privately driven waste to energy, huge ideas and visions, but I think there's also a very critical view on waste to energy, withholding investments into recycling and reduction of waste. So I don't know, maybe the colleagues can say a bit more if that is a environmental and sound and economic option, waste to energy, but otherwise I think it's district heating or individual solutions on the house level.
Just to add that for private sector it's very difficult, because we work a lot with the private sector to enter this project at the moment. So for private sector is a price signal is very important. And for technology, the private investor will do assessment if the market prices are cost reflecting. They will assess any city and they will make a calculation. If it's biomass, cheaper heat pump, or heat pump can be different. I saw some ideas also. You have rivers in some cities, it's from water to air instead of ground to air. And then assess thermal solar, for example, etc. But for this to assess and make a decision, you need the market price. Now, in most cases, this is subsidized. People used to pay cheap, and electricity, we know, is subsidized. So there is no incentives for people to change and pay more, and for investors to come, because there is high risk, the investments will not be paid back.
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Vistal Main. I'm professor of environmental law here in Pristina University. I just wanted to maybe add a short comment and agree with what the panelists and Dardan just mentioned, that I think we are at the stage where we need to have some realistic expectations in the Kosovo context. And I think Dardan just mentioned the political consensus. I would say political stability is key, like to have proper and strong institutions in place, both central and local. I think that is vital for the innovative ideas and decarbonization process to be properly implemented. Since I come from a sort of a law background, I'm rather familiar with the legal environment in Kosovo. I know there is a sound legislation in place. We have, for instance, a law on climate change recently introduced. Also, a number of environmental laws. We have, for instance, while you were discussing for the energy performance of buildings, maybe just a quick reminder that there is a law in place when it comes to that. It's quite a recent legislation that places heavily duties and administrative obligations on part of the both the public sector and private sector, actually, for obtaining those certificates. So there is a lot to be done, actually. CBAM in one aspect. We have a law on climate change that still is only in place. It needs to be implemented by way of introducing a number of administrative instructions, actually. But the law itself, it's fine for Kosovo to put a small step forward, but the law lacks targets. When we talk with the Ministry of Environment, for instance, there is a legitimate sort of justification that we are still pretty far from at least going to 20 or 30% of meeting the required targets by 2030. So I think I totally agree that in addition to strong political institutions, these processes are quite sophisticated, and they have proven to be challenging for rather developed countries, both politically and economically, let alone for Western Balkan countries that still face, if you read the latest European Commission reports for all these countries, I mean, there is, you know, the famous phrases that there is no progress, that there's little progress made in this respect, and that sort of keeps repeating year and year. Just a short, maybe, just a short comment, but I don't know whether one of the panelists would be able to reflect on these. Thanks.
Hello, thank for this all-male panel and all-male people who are asking questions. I have just a short comment. We mentioned several times market prices and privatization and private companies, but market prices would lead many people into energy poverty. We have already all over the region a lot of people who are into energy poverty, and if we completely put prices of electricity or heating on the market, it will lead even more people who would not even be able to use electricity. And I think it's not always a solution to put everything on the market, and I think we also should think about public interest and to have debate what is in public interest, because for me it's okay to have subsidized public district heating if it's work for public interest.
Very quick question. I know all the panelists, and it's always a pleasure to hear you speak and give us insights and foreground some of the challenges which we're facing. The question is, as you're representing international financial institutions, it seems like the only way to tackle some of the problems, such as decarbonizing home heating or the problem of affordability and so on, is the energy communities, because there is no other way of solving the problems of multi-apartment buildings. For example, 75% of the electricity bill which I pay comes from heating, which is basically an old, as you say, an old electric system. I changed it, but it was 85, now 75. Still no other, I cannot invest in a heat pump because I don't know where to put it. So it should be centralized heat pump for multi-apartment building. But yeah, it seems like energy communities seems a solution. My question to you is whether you would be willing to engage with the energy communities and pilot maybe one, and then would this sound like a scaling solution for you? Either in district heating or renewable energies, whatever has to do with energy. Thank you.
Maybe a comment on the comment before, or the question on subsidies. Maybe different than others. I'm also not against subsidizing, let's say, the right thing, but definitely I think it's not helpful to subsidize, let's say, environmental harmful things, yeah, and where we are standing now is that those sources that harm the climate and they are subsidized or too cheap, yeah, and and other than that, I think what we see now, for example, with the liberalized electricity prices, I think what drives up the price currently is not the is incomplete liberalization, so to say. So the hope is still there that with sufficient actors and producers in the market, that the price will go down. Yeah. So this is another aspect. So I think, for example, as KfW, of course, we also work in the public interest, and there's no interest to make clean heating solutions unaffordable. It's the opposite. But probably to avoid that other not sustainable solutions are competing to that extent.
Yeah, just to answer a few questions. On market prices, obviously it goes by default with the social policy, social net but targeted. Why you need to supply cheap district heating to rich people? You just lock your country, and it's wrong. So, of course, people who need support, they should get support, but it should be targeted. And obviously, this is in all countries, so market prices goes together with the social, right social policy, targeted social policy. This is to answer. But if you don't do it properly, then you are locked. Nobody will come, private investor will not come. Who is going to invest? No one, as we see it here. On a community, it's a good question. Actually, I had a meeting this week, right, with Diana from Community Development Fund. It's a good idea, and we are happy also to support, and we believe, but again, for this we need some work with the municipalities, and municipalities need more authorities to promote and to prepare this type of projects. I believe this is a good idea, and it's part of this Renewable Energy Directive. So there is a future, but we need to do many steps, to get there.
Yeah, and just to say that I think the issue with subsidies and in energy is that the rich actually benefit more from subsidies, because if you're subsidizing all the prices, take the example of a house where the richer person can use firewood or coal, which is subsidized or is not cost reflective. They have a bigger house, they will probably consume more, so they're actually benefiting more from subsidized prices. So what we're saying is that we're not saying, let the people that cannot afford it just deal with it. We're just saying you have a social protection program for those people, you target them well, and then the rest start at least somehow gradually paying a more cost-reflective price. It doesn't have to be the whole price, but at least there's some kind of trajectory that at some point, because this also sends the right signals and the right incentives for people then to invest in energy efficiency. So I think that's the important thing about the pricing part. On energy communities, I think the issue is that, and I think also EBRD and others have tried. We have tried to think about a way, how do we finance energy efficiency investments in multifamily apartment buildings? And then you'll run into so many issues about how do you get homeowners to get together and invest in one large building. And I think that's kind of the similar issues we will see with energy communities. Again, you'll need a lot more regulation and a lot more things being introduced so that this somehow functions, especially when you want to bring in the private sector. I think that's a critical thing. So that's quite challenging. On the question on energy performance certificates, yes, the law is very ambitious, quite ambitious. We are hoping to see it being rolled out. I think so far 2 buildings have been have gotten EPCs, but I think the government is still working on how to roll this out throughout the country. But the law is definitely very, very ambitious.
Thank you very much to the panelists, to the audience, and I think this is the right time to kind of stop here and enjoy some of the drinks and